No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato. I want to share something with you that I wrote for a symposium promotion back in 2012. It's a concept created years before when I was executive director at basicsproject.org, a 501c3 education and research organization focused on educating on the threats of Islamofascism and the American Fifth Column, and how those threats multiply when the population exists constitutionally illiterate. Back then, it was a projection of what could happen. Today, we are witnessing this in real time. The moment is fast approaching. The convergence of apathy and evil, oblivion and conquest, is soon upon us. Three critical issues, directly related to our nation's survival, are coming together to present one of the greatest challenges the United States will ever face, if, in fact, it survives. Externally, the threat comes in the form of a violent and intolerant theocratic ideology that quests to rule the world, expunging or making subservient all other religious and moral dogmas known to man. In its wake, it leaves indiscriminate death by the millions, using the innocent and the ignorant to facilitate its conquest through fear and intimidation. For those who are conquered, for those who survive, an all-encompassing existence of servitude and oppression. Internally, forces antithetical to the American philosophy, to our true Judeo-Christian roots, are using our own system of government and our electoral process to move our nation incrementally away from its charter as a constitutional republic, fundamentally transforming the United States of America from a constitutional republic to a democracy, of which our founders and framers warned, then to democratic socialism, to the totalitarian elitism of Marxism. This American Fifth Column infects our land with a progressive ideological cancer, killing liberty and freedom in its path. Yet these threats are not new to our country. We have faced them down before. We have, in the past, stared into the violent and deceptive eyes of evil and come out stronger for the experience. So why are these forces so potent today? What makes this moment in time so different than in the past? Simple. Today, we the people are complicit in our own demise. Our nation has become so constitutionally illiterate, so oblivious to the worth and value of our God-given rights, bestowed by our Creator as inalienable and enshrined in our charters of freedom, that we willingly abdicate them, casting them aside as if a burden, and facilitating the potency of the evils that confront our very existence. We, the people, through apathy, through ignorance, have created our own destiny. We have created the perfect storm. "12 years later, this prognostication is a reality. The perfect storm is upon us. Neo-Marxist protesters who took to the streets championing the fraudulent Black Lives Matter movement are now occupying campuses in support of the pro-Hamas terrorists in Gaza, doing so violently and in a well-funded and coordinated manner. Internal and external forces that pose serious threats to both our nation and the free world have converged to fight against the very idea of freedom and Americanism. Truly, we are witnessing, in real time, the perfect storm. And if we don't correct course in a dramatic way, these forces have the potential to destroy our republic and render the idea of free societies, of self-governance, nothing more than a memory of what could have been. Something to think about as you consider your choices this November. After this, Monday's segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 860 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. My main focus was to be the best I could be on the basketball court. The first inkling that something was wrong was I started to notice that I couldn't do things without losing my breath. I still didn't think that it was anything serious until I couldn't make it through the airport. Every 20 or 30 yards, I had to sit down and get my breath. Every physical exertion seemed to exhaust me. I knew something was wrong, and then I went to a baseball game with some friends, and I couldn't deal with any exertion. And finally, I went from the baseball game to the hospital where I was diagnosed with AFib. When I first noticed symptoms, I should have gone to the doctor and told him what was happening. Instead, I tried to let it pass. It took me listening to the cardiologist to help me get it straight as to what I needed to do. AFib increases the risk of stroke about 5 times. So you need to go and find out what's happening. You need to know all of it, and you need to deal with it. It took me a while before I got wise. The No Time to Wait campaign expresses the urgency that people need to find out if they have AFib. I want my experience to help others understand the symptoms of atrial fibrillation. I didn't pay attention to my symptoms, which kept coming and going, or discuss them with my doctor. Experiencing irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, or any other AFib symptoms, including shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness, you should talk to your doctor. When it comes to your health, this is no time to wait.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Somebody else that we really appreciate and we're glad to have along with us here in this Monday edition of the program is none other than Frank Salvato from undergroundusa.com and, of course, also author of the book Nullification. Good morning, Frank.
Mr. Kyle.
All right. Well, there's a lot to talk about. Certainly there's a lot to talk about. We'll talk politics as well, but I do want to get your take on the ongoing campus demonstrations. UCLA had some pretty good clashes, unfortunately, on Sunday. And at Harvard Yard, they took down the American flag and raised up the Palestinian flag.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. And the fact that there are some university administrators who are starting to take a less flat-footed tone on this to say, you know what, the policies are the policies for a reason. You transgress them. In many cases, you've broken laws. Therefore, there shall be consequences. They need to take that stance. It's not unreasonable to demand that everybody feel safe on a college campus. It's not unreasonable at all. And the actions of these protesters have continually shown that there is an air of hatred on these campuses, and in many cases, violence. So, is it orchestrated? Yes, it is. It's coordinated and orchestrated, and it's funded by the same dark money that finances the radical left of the Democrat Party. It's been proven. They followed the money back. The Arabella Group, the Tides Foundation, they've been funding these local groups, these local pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas groups on the college campuses and fueling this ignorant hatred that's happening. And when I say ignorant, I mean that. Half to 3/4 of these kids don't know what they're protesting. And the other 25% are professional protesters. In UCLA and at Harvard and at Yale, you saw people who weren't even affiliated with the universities on campus starting all this garbage.
Yeah.
So it's this weird throwback romanticism to the 60s because they missed it. That's just stupid.
Indeed. And you mentioned about, this stuff is just being kind of released, it's almost as if they've been given license to just uncover the hatred that is underlying. And that's a huge concern because right now, I mean, it's for all intents and purposes, these are protests, but can you imagine if the true believers ever got the word that, okay, now it's time to October 7th all over the place in the U.S., imagine what they could be capable of doing.
Well, I'm going to imagine that Columbia would really want the NYPD on campus if that started ever happening.
Yeah.
The fact that they're saying we're not going to call in law enforcement anymore when these things get out of control, that's stupid as well. If you're acting like a criminal, you should be treated like a criminal. But I guess in New York, if you're a criminal, you just get to have autonomy. Now they want amnesty, and some of the professors are demanding amnesty because the protesters are concerned that their actions will have consequences. They might get suspended. They might not be able to take their finals. They might get expelled. It might follow them into their post-educational life. Well, hey, you did it. It should follow you. No amnesty. If you truly believed in your cause, you'd stand up and take it on the chin.
Well, that's great.
That just proves to me they don't know what they're protesting and they don't believe in the cause. It's just a fad.
Indeed. And for some, they keep saying, well, we're protesting genocide. And it's not just that they're protesting, but their demands include divesting anything that these schools have. They're going after companies next. Anything that has any tie to Israel, at least to them, would be fair game, and to their backers. And again, I think that's all part and parcel of a grander design to weaken the U.S. relationship with Israel and our ability to stand by them when more attacks come.
I'm not sure that they think that deeply.
I'm giving them too much credit.
Yeah, I think they're much more shallow. And if that's what they want to make sure that they're manipulating people's investment portfolios. The fact that most of these kids are from upper middle class and lower upper class families, maybe they should talk to their parents about making sure they're not investing in BlackRock.
One of the things that we talk about a lot in one of your areas of expertise is what happens with radical Islam. Over in Germany, they've been protesting or marching, basically, and they've been calling for a caliphate. They, or bashing democratic values and these kinds of things. And it just seems to me that, well, here we go again. And of course they're upset against Israel as well. So we've heard people talk about they might be those who want to try to establish such a thing here in this country, where practically that would be very hard, but you still got a lot of extremists on both sides of the Atlantic.
Well, people need to understand when you say to the everyman, when you mention Islam or the Muslim faith, people automatically think, well, it's just another religion. After 9/11, some of us took it very seriously to dig into what that dogma was. And when you read the Quran in conjunction with the Hadith, it becomes painfully clear that it is a religion of conquest. The devout Muslims are mandated by the word of Allah to establish a global caliphate under Islam, where every other religion and all the peoples of the world take a knee to Islam as their, for lack of a better word, overlord. Mm-hmm. It's mandated in the Quran. So if you're a devout Muslim, that's what you believe, and that's what you have to do to please your God. So when you have these marches throughout Europe and in the West and in free nations where you have many religions and you have religious freedom, that's antithetical to what their mandate is. They're trying to expand the influence of Islam in the world. So when you look at that, it's not, and that it is unreasonable, but I'm going to use that idea to move forward. It's not unreasonable to see why they're doing it. It's their religion. They don't get to go to heaven if they don't fulfill the mandates of their religion. So they're trying to expand it and follow the word of their God. That doesn't mesh with the West. As much as, I get called Islamophobic from the left all the time, but it's because they don't understand the Islamic religion.
Well, that's right. And obviously, this is, especially what we're seeing in Germany is very disturbing. It's pretty much, I think, happening in Hamburg, but they're saying things like caliphate is the solution and this kind of thing. But they want to impose it by hook or by crook. It's not about, hey, can I give you some literature or something like that? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but it is based on the idea of conquering, using that term, and it's not something that sits well, especially with Americans.
It's a correct term to use, conquering.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the map of Islamic influence and authority over the time since 600, it has ebbed and flowed by advancing through violence, not only in the north of Africa and throughout the Middle East, but into Europe all the way to Spain. And it's been pushed back into the Middle East twice. So you've got the people talk about the Ottoman Empire, and it's almost just, it's just an era. Do a little bit of reading on it about how that came to be and what they did under their authority, and suddenly it's not so romantic. It's pretty brutal. So when in the modern day, this is another advancement into Europe. When some of us were saying, "Hey, Europe, you better watch it," because all of these quote unquote refugees that are leaving the Middle East, that there's a purpose behind this exodus from their homelands. There's an expansion happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the United States, like you said, it's a little harder to do it here in the United States because of the protections we have under the Bill of Rights, even though they're eroding today. But you have places like Dearborn, Michigan, where they have set up Sharia councils and they don't use our legal system.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to ask you about, where, we've heard about these things in various parts of Europe and France and other places over the years, the idea of the no-go areas. Mm-hmm. And that is very, very scary because, it's one thing to say, well, we're going to have our own set of laws, but at the same time, then you could have abuse, you could have all kinds of things that are happening within that area that should not be happening, obviously, anywhere, but certainly not in this country. And law enforcement has no, I don't want to say jurisdiction, but no ability to really maintain law and order.
No, they don't. And that's the danger of having a parallel judicial system. You can't have that because you're correct. There are certain things that are allowed under Sharia law that are just horrible. When you think about honor killings, we read about them every now and then, but they happen. And a man under Sharia law is absolutely within his right to discipline the females in his family any way he sees fit, including physical abuse. So Sharia law, read up on it. It's brutal, and it does not mesh with the West. I mean, it absolutely doesn't mesh with the individualism that's enshrined in Americanism. So to say, hey, man, live and let live. Okay, I'm willing to do that if you're willing to reform your religion. And that's never going to happen. We've covered this before. The Quran, by the Muslim faith, is considered the literal word of God, not an interpretation and not somebody telling the story. Not somebody interpreting the events. In the Bible, there's different gospels because even the disciples saw things a little bit differently. In the Quran, it's, hey, Muhammad went out, God spoke to him. This is the literal word of God. So there's no interpreting it. And that's what makes it not mesh with the West.
Well, and certainly one of the biggest examples is what happened, of course, when the Taliban took over again in Afghanistan, and the fate of the women there. I mean, just to bring that up, which I think is a significant issue here, just to bring that up is just horrifying. As the father of daughters, I can't imagine this kind of thing.
Since the U.S. left Afghanistan and the Taliban took over, they are back to the days when Al-Qaeda was welcomed in that country. As far as women's rights are concerned, they can't go to school. They can't go into public without a male. They're right back to when women were treated like chattel. And if you want to know what religious freedom's like in an Islamic country, take a look at what's happening in Egypt. You've got Coptic Christians in Egypt that wanted to renovate their church. And the Muslims in this small town said, you want to do what? That's forbidden under Islam. We're going to burn your houses down. So tell me where this is a wonderful thing that we have to look at Islam as a religion equal to Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism or any of the other great religions. I don't think it should have that kind of moniker. It's not a great religion. It's an oppressive dogma.
And it serves for the basis of political expansion, these kinds of things. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you want to, unfortunately, we keep hearing about Donald Trump's going to be a dictator on day one. Well, this is the exact definition of being a dictator. There was a couple more things you wanted to add about the reformation of Islam.
Right. This is not a unique idea. There are people who happen to be Muslim who are actually trying to move that idea forward. People like Zuhdi Jasser and Walid Faris, people like Wafa Sultan. These are prominent voices within the Muslim community who are saying we've got to expunge the violence from our religion, even if it means interpreting the words of Allah. So it's not just me, saying that something's got to change within that religion. There are people within the religion who understand that dogma doesn't mesh up with the 21st century and certainly doesn't mesh up with the ideas of the West.
Well, indeed. And there's always that thought about justification. For example, I know a lot of these protesters, as you've mentioned, some of them don't even know why they're there protesting. They just heard there was a protest. And so they really can't articulate to you a lot of these different ideas. But there are those who are the true believers, and they will justify any action that they want to do for feeling that what they're doing has some kind of righteousness to it. And that's what's kind of scary when it comes to the strict implementation of Sharia law, because there's this underlying, quote, justification, and you have to change that. I mean, that's a change of the heart.
No, that's a change of the culture.
Yeah.
You've got this, whether we like to admit it or not, and sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes I'm even guilty of it. We live in a time where when you read the headline, you think you've read the article.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about that, a lot of these kids on campus who are protesting who don't know what they're talking about, they believe because they've talked about it with their friends to a nauseating extent that now we're experts on it. Now we're experts on the Palestinians because we support them. So we know their plight. We feel their plight. We understand. Well, you might want to emotionally be sycophantic with these people, but you have to figure out what you're being emotional about. There's a reason why Jordan, Saudi Arabia, even Iran, Iraq, Egypt, there's a reason why they don't want the Palestinians, that they haven't absorbed them. Like the Quran says, they must take care of their other Muslim brothers. And it's because of what they do. It's because of how they exist, how they live their lives. You know, they elected a terrorist organization to represent them. And then this terrorist organization uses the population as human shields to advance their cause. You know, imagine if the U.S. government did that to U.S. citizens. We'd have a revolutionary war again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, Frank, it seems like a lot of this, the thrust of a lot of these, not just protests that we're seeing right now, but overall, the what's being communicated coming out of the terrorists, this idea that if Israel was suddenly wiped off the map tomorrow, suddenly all of our problems would be solved. I mean, they actually say things like the big problem in the world is Israel, its existence. I mean, just, you know, this is ridiculous hypothetical, but I don't think they'd even stop there. I mean, if Israel went out off the map tomorrow, they're not going to say, okay, that's good. Okay, we're standing down all terroristic activities. I think they would just continue.
No, you're absolutely right. This is just a battle to them. This is not the war. This is not the war. The war is the establishment of the global caliphate, and don't take my word for it. Listen to the people who are protesting in Germany. They want a global caliphate. It's mandated by their religion. So, okay, let's say they win, and suddenly Israel is pushed into the sea. Then the problem for them is not going to be the Jews. It's going to be the disenfranchisement of being able to do whatever they want to in any land whatsoever, whether it's against the law in that land or not, because it doesn't adhere to Sharia law. You know, so there's always going to be that devout Islamofascistic element within the Muslim community that will not be happy until they rule the world. And it just, you know, the left has to come to grips with this. And that means reading the Quran and understanding the Hadith and believing what they read. Mm-hmm. They have to become educated on this to understand the threat.
You know, even within that word, Islamofascist, I think it's sometimes a little difficult to dissect in the Western culture, because you hear the word Islamo or Islam and you think religion. You hear the word fascist and you think Mussolini. And it's like, how are those two things, you know, together? Is that, you know, some kind of weird thing? But it's actually exactly descriptive of what's happening and the kind of thing you could expect if you had this kind of government, or rulers, I should say.
When religious dogma is your constitution, you necessarily have a religious political apparatus. So the marriage of Islam and fascism, you're right, it's an accurate descriptor. Mm-hmm. It's an accurate descriptor because everything that touches a devout Muslim's life has to do with their religion. And anybody who doesn't follow their religion is inferior. That's why they call them infidels or dhimmis. You know, you're inferior. If you're not Muslim in a Muslim nation and it's run by devout Muslims, then you have to pay a tax because you're not Muslim in order for you to live in relative peace, which, as we've seen in Egypt, doesn't really happen.
Right, exactly. And, you know, our government and certainly our State Department, you know, they keep saying, well, it's the two-state solution. You know, that's also so much a misnomer, you know, that somehow that would also solve the problems. I mean, are they that ridiculously out to lunch to believe that continually pushing the two-state solution is going to actually bring peace.
Well, yes, because in the Hamas charter, it said, they say specifically they don't want it. They don't want it. You know, this has been a Western solution, this two-state solution idea. It has nothing to do with the players of the Middle East. They don't want it. So, yeah, you know, the Hamas and the Islamofascists in that community, they will take it because that's going to give them the ceasefire that they so desperately need in order not to get wiped off the face of the map, which is, it's called a hudna. There is a phrase for it in the Muslim world, and that is the ceasefire to regroup and rearm and re-strategize. And it's done under the precipice of al-taqiyya, which is the idea under the Muslim faith that you can lie if the end justifies the means. That's what the radical left and Islamofascists have in common, which gives them a common bond. The end justifies the mean. It doesn't matter whether you're dealing with the truth.
And you mentioned, too, with the left, I mean, the left would certainly be more than happy to let a lot of the dirty work, as it were, be done by these extreme groups, you know, and they feel like, well, you know, they'll get part of this job done for us, and we'll progress.
Well, you think about it. The Islamofascists are mandated under their dogma to rule the world. The Marxists are mandated under their dogma to rule the world. So they're cut out of the same cloth. The only problem with this is if one of them wins and it wipes out freedom and gets rid of the free West, they're going to end up fighting each other to the slaughter. Nobody's thinking things through. It's stupid.
I think you're really right about that. I'm not trying to laugh, but that's it. But you're exactly right about that.
If you didn't laugh, you'd be crying.
No kidding. Well, Frank Salvato, undergroundusa.com is the website. The book is Nullification. This has been a great discussion this morning, Frank. Thank you so much. We're going to talk to you on Friday.
Stay low, my friend.
If you like the podcast, subscribe, leave a comment, rate it if your platform lets you. Be sure to head on over to undergroundusa.com to sign up for our Substack, which comes straight to you, circumventing the censors and the fact checkers, because we both know that they're worthless, and that's been proven over time. And be sure to pick up your copy of Nullification, the Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, available in Kindle and paperback over at Amazon.com. You're listening to Underground USA. My name is Frank Salvato, and we will be back right after this.
This podcast is a production of the Compass Point Group.
When someone is having a stroke, every minute counts. Just as putting out a fire quickly can stop it from spreading, treating a stroke quickly can reduce damage to the brain. The clock begins ticking as soon as you spot the signs of a stroke, because some treatments can only be used if the patient reaches the hospital in the first 3 hours after symptoms appear. So don't wait. Call 911 right away and get the person to a hospital immediately, even if the symptoms go away. If you think someone is having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile and check whether one side of their face is drooping. A is for arms. Have the person raise both arms and see if one arm drifts downwards. S is for speech. Ask the person to repeat a short phrase and notice if their words sound slurred. And finally, T is for time. If you spot any of these signs, call 911 right away to get the person to a hospital fast. Strokes are medical emergencies. The sooner a patient gets treatment, the better their chance of a good recovery.